Imagine this. You're an ordinary person, just like anyone else. You have a family, dreams, and a moral compass guiding you between right and wrong. But one day, you find yourself in a room, given a simple order. In front of you sits a stranger, hands bound. A man in a lab coat tells you to press a button. "It's just an experiment," he says. The person in the chair flinches as electricity surges through their body. You hesitate, but the authority figure insists, "Keep going." Now, take a moment. What would you do? This isn't a scene from a movie. This is the real-life Milgram experiment, one of the most shocking psychological studies ever conducted. In this experiment, ordinary people, teachers, clerks, fathers, mothers, were instructed to administer what they believed were deadly electric shocks to a stranger. And disturbingly, over 65% of participants obeyed orders until the very end, even as the person in the chair screamed in agony. But that was just an experiment. What happens when this kind of obedience spills into real life? Let's rewind to 1944 in a quiet European town. A soldier, once a loving family man, receives an order. He hesitates, his rifle trembling in his hands, as innocent civilians look at him with pleading eyes. But then he hears it. "Do your duty." And with that, he pulls the trigger. This soldier wasn't a monster. He was just like you, just like me. So, how does a good person become capable of such horrors? We like to believe only bad people do evil things, psychopaths or the heartless. But what if I told you that under the right conditions, you could be just as capable? Psychology has shown us time and time again that the scariest thing about human nature is not that evil exists, but that it exists within all of us. History has proven this over and over. The Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, Abu Ghraib. Ordinary people became perpetrators of unimaginable cruelty, not because they were evil, but because of a hidden psychological process that erodes morality, warps perception, and turns good people into monsters. And here's the terrifying part. You may not even notice it happening. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow descent, small compromises, tiny steps, little justifications. Before you know it, you've crossed a line you promised you never would. This isn't just history. This is happening right now, in your workplace, in politics, on social media, and even in your daily life. And if you don't recognize it, if you don't know how to stop it, you might become part of the problem. In the next few minutes, I'll show you how this happens. The 5 psychological forces that slowly reshape a person's ethics, and how you can protect yourself. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that the moment you think, "I would never do that," is the moment you're most at risk. Most people think evil is something you choose. Only bad people do bad things. But history tells a darker truth. The reality is much scarier. Under the right circumstances, anyone can be led to do terrible things. Not because they wake up and decide to abandon their morals, but because they're slowly drawn into a psychological trap they don't even notice. This descent doesn't happen randomly. It follows a predictable 5-step process that has turned ordinary people into perpetrators of unimaginable cruelty throughout history. I call it the corruption cycle. Stage 1. Moral erosion. The first step is tiny, seemingly harmless compromises. A little white lie, a small betrayal, bending your values just a bit because it seems necessary. At first, it feels like no big deal. But here's the trick. Every small compromise lowers the bar for the next one. What seemed unthinkable becomes easier. Little by little, your sense of right and wrong cracks. Stage 2. Obedience to authority, the illusion of duty. The infamous Milgram experiment showed something terrifying. People will commit horrible acts simply because an authority figure tells them to. Whether it's soldiers in war, employees following unethical policies, or citizens enforcing unjust laws, the mind convinces itself, "I'm just doing my job." But this obedience strips away responsibility, making it easier for evil to spread under the guise of duty. Stage 3. The power of group identity, the us versus them trap. Humans naturally crave belonging, and this need can make us vulnerable to manipulation. Once we see ourselves as part of a group, we start viewing outsiders as different or inferior, and that's when dehumanization kicks in. History proves that when we're taught to see others as less than human, atrocities become justifiable. Stage 4. Self-justification and moral licensing. The mind's sneaky trick. No one wants to believe they are the villain, so the brain rewrites the story. I had no choice, or I did it for the greater good. This is how the worst criminals have justified their actions. The scariest part? We all do it. Every time we excuse something wrong because we see ourselves as good, we sink deeper into the cycle. Stage 5. Dehumanization. The point of no return. This is the final stage, when a person, group, or society strips humanity from others entirely. Once someone is no longer seen as human, cruelty becomes easy, and morality disappears. This is the fuel behind genocides, oppressive regimes, and even online hate culture. It's the irreversible step into becoming a monster. This cycle isn't just something that happens in history. It can happen to any of us. Recognizing this process is the first step in breaking free from it. In the next section, we'll dive deeper into each stage, starting with the dangerous, invisible process of moral erosion. Evil doesn't make a loud entrance. It sneaks in quietly, one small choice at a time. No one wakes up and decides to abandon their morals. It happens gradually. A tiny lie, a little betrayal, a decision that feels right in the moment, even if it goes against your values. Maybe it's bending the rules to help a friend, staying silent when something's wrong, or making an excuse for an action that benefits you. And when nothing immediately bad happens, your mind learns a dangerous lesson. It's not that bad. The brain is wired to protect us from guilt. So when we do something that doesn't align with our values, instead of owning up to it, we make excuses. Everyone does it. Just this once, it's not hurting anyone. These little justifications weaken your moral compass, and the next time, it's easier to cross the line. What once felt unthinkable becomes normal. A single bad choice seems small, but it's never just one. The more you justify, the easier it becomes to make bigger compromises. History is full of examples like this. The Watergate scandal, corporate fraud, even genocides. Some of the worst atrocities started with minor wrongs. Small orders followed, tiny injustices enforced, until they snowballed into horrific actions. Psychologists call this the foot in the door effect. Once you agree to one small unethical act, you're more likely to say yes to something worse later on. The most dangerous belief? I would never do that. But here's the truth. No one ever thinks they're capable of evil until it's too late. It's not about being a bad person. It's about not recognizing the first step down a dangerous path. And once that step is taken, the rest of the descent becomes shockingly easy. In the next section, let's dive into the second stage of the corruption cycle. How obedience to authority can overpower our own morals, pushing even the most well-intentioned individuals to commit terrible acts. Most people think they control their actions and that their morals are rock solid. But history and psychology reveal something much darker. Under the right circumstances, even good people can be led to do horrific things. And the scariest part, they don't even realize they're doing anything wrong. This is the terrifying power of obedience, one of the strongest and most dangerous forces in human psychology. It can strip away personal responsibility, override morality, and turn ordinary people into tools of harm. In the 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram conducted one of the most shocking experiments in history. Participants were told they were part of a learning study, tasked with giving electric shocks to a learner in another room whenever they got an answer wrong. With each mistake, the shock level increased. The learner, who was actually an actor, screamed in pain, begged for mercy, and eventually went silent, implying they were seriously hurt. But under the command of a scientist in a white lab coat, 65% of participants kept going, delivering shocks up to the highest level, 450 volts, believing they were causing serious harm, maybe even death. Why? Because they were told, the experiment requires that you continue. It was the illusion of just following orders. Milgram's experiment was more than just a test. It was a shocking look at human nature. The same excuse, I was just following orders, has been used by soldiers, police officers, and everyday people during some of the darkest moments in history. Nazi officers and concentration camp guards claimed they were just obeying commands. Many weren't sadistic monsters, just ordinary men who surrendered their morality to authority. The My Lai massacre in 1968, when U.S. soldiers slaughtered over 500 innocent civilians in Vietnam, including children, was the result of this same mindset. Corporate scandals, too. Many financial crimes aren't masterminded by villains, but carried out by employees who follow unethical instructions from superiors, thinking they're not responsible. The deadliest trap? Believing that obeying authority absolves you of personal accountability. Another haunting study, the Stanford prison experiment by Philip Zimbardo in 1971, showed just how quickly obedience can spiral into cruelty. College students were split into guards and prisoners in a mock prison. Within days, the guards, normal students like anyone else, became sadistic, humiliating, and abusing the prisoners. What started as a role play turned into real psychological torment. The guards weren't following direct orders. They had simply internalized their authority. The experiment had to be shut down early. Zimbardo later said, "Most of us can undergo significant character transformations when caught up in the crucible of social forces." The most disturbing part? Everyone involved thought they'd never behave like that. Ask anyone. Would you have shocked the learner? Would you have been a cruel prison guard? Most would say, no way. But every person in those experiments thought the same before they found themselves in those situations. Obedience is not about being evil. It's about being socially conditioned. We're taught from childhood to respect authority. Teachers, bosses, governments, law enforcement. This conditioning runs so deep that when faced with an authoritative command, our first instinct is to comply, not to question. That's how good people end up doing terrible things. Not because they're bad, but because they don't question the orders they follow. To resist this psychological force, you have to be aware of it. When given an order, especially one that feels wrong, the key is to pause and ask yourself, would I do this if no one were telling me to? Would I still feel like a good person afterward? If history judged this moment, how would it be remembered? Because obeying without morality isn't loyalty, it's surrender. Imagine this. You're part of a group, whether it's your family, your friends, your political party, or even your country. We all crave belonging, but there's a darker side to this need. It can turn us against others. When we divide the world into us versus them, something terrifying happens. Morality slips away, compassion fades, and the people outside our group become less than human. This is the us versus them trap, a powerful force that can turn good people into monsters. Psychologists have proven this with experiments like Henry Tajfel's minimal group studies. He divided people into random groups, and even when there was no real difference between them, participants favored their own group. They were willing to harm or disadvantage the other group, even if it didn't benefit them. This shows how dangerous group loyalty can be. It can override logic, fairness, and morality. If people are willing to discriminate against an arbitrary group, think about how much worse it gets when race, religion, or ideology is involved. History is filled with examples of how this mindset led to atrocities. The Nazis dehumanized Jews by calling them rats. The Hutus in Rwanda called Tutsis cockroaches, and slavers saw African people as savages. Propaganda convinces people that these others are the reason for their suffering, stripping away their humanity. Once we stop seeing someone as human, cruelty becomes easier. The most horrifying part? These atrocities weren't committed by monsters. They were carried out by ordinary people who were swept up in this mentality. We don't need to look far into history to see this happening. It's playing out right now, especially on social media. Political opponents are no longer just people with different views. They are traitors or evil. Cancel culture, online hate, and mob justice thrive on the idea that we can label someone the enemy and justify any action against them. This is modern dehumanization, and just like in history, it starts small but can escalate into real-world consequences. So, how can we escape this trap? First, recognize when you're falling into it. If you start seeing a whole group as the enemy, stop and ask, who benefits from this division? Remember, no group is a monolith. Every person is an individual. Resist the narratives that label others as less human. Because if we stop seeing each other as human, we are capable of anything. Here's where it gets scary. Self-justification. the human mind has a way of making excuses for its bad actions. I was just following orders. It was for the greater good, or everyone does it. This is how history's worst criminals justify their crimes. It's not just the corrupt politicians or war criminals, it's all of us. We've all made small justifications that allowed us to feel good about actions that were wrong. The more we justify, the easier it becomes to cross the line. Think about it. Someone cheats on a test and says, "I deserve this. I worked hard." A worker mistreats a colleague, rationalizing they had it coming. A driver runs a red light, thinking everyone does it. These small justifications build up over time, and what once seemed wrong starts to feel normal. The moment we say, "I had no choice," or "it was for the greater good," we are on dangerous ground. This is how people, normal people like you and me, end up doing terrible things. But the good news is, it's possible to fight this. To break free from the cycle, we have to question our actions and our motivations. Stop and ask yourself, would I still feel good about this if no one were watching? Am I justifying something that feels wrong? The key is self-awareness and radical empathy, remembering that every person you meet has thoughts, feelings, and struggles just like you. When we stop seeing people as the enemy, we can prevent this cycle of dehumanization from continuing. History has shown us that the line between good and evil is thinner than we think, and it runs through every human heart. The only way to protect ourselves from becoming part of this dark process is to stay aware, question our actions, and resist the urge to justify harm. Because once we cross that line, there's no turning back. How can we resist the urge to justify harmful actions and protect ourselves from self-deception? It starts with recognizing discomfort as a red flag. If you find yourself justifying your actions, stop and ask, "Am I making excuses?" Be honest with yourself. The biggest danger lies in the lies we tell ourselves. Every time we justify something wrong, we move a step closer to crossing a moral line. It begins with small justifications, ones that seem harmless at first. But here's the catch. These small steps, over time, lead to huge consequences. The scariest part is that anyone can fall into this trap, no matter how good they think they are. Dehumanization is the final and most dangerous step. It's when you stop seeing others as human beings and begin seeing them as objects or enemies. This switch is where morality vanishes, and actions that once seemed unthinkable suddenly feel justified. We see this pattern throughout history, from the Rwandan genocide to Nazi Germany. The media and propaganda have used this trick for centuries to justify violence and oppression. It's happening right now too, on social media, in politics, and even in everyday life. How does this happen? The brain has a unique ability to empathize with others, but if we stop seeing someone as human, that empathy fades. This is how war, genocide, and hate take root. Once we label others as less than human, cruelty becomes easier to justify. And the moment we cross that line, we lose our ability to stop. To resist this, we must stay aware. Be mindful of the language we use and the way we treat others, especially when we feel disconnected or angry. If we start seeing a group of people as the enemy, we need to stop and ask ourselves why. Are we being manipulated? Is there another side to the story? The key to breaking free from this cycle is radical empathy. It's about seeing humanity in everyone, even those we disagree with. When we see others as equals, as human beings with thoughts and feelings just like us, we break the power of dehumanization. And this doesn't just apply to others. It applies to ourselves. The road to evil doesn't begin with grand evil intentions. It starts with tiny justifications that go unchecked. The scariest belief is thinking, "I would never do that." The moment you think you're immune to falling into this trap is the moment you're most at risk. But here's the good news. We can fight it. The answer isn't easy, but it's possible. We must practice daily self-reflection. Question our choices, challenge our biases. When we feel uncomfortable justifying an action, that's our cue to pause, ask ourselves hard questions, and act with moral courage. The key to breaking free from this trap is to keep questioning everything, to remain self-aware and accountable, especially when it feels uncomfortable. Look beyond the labels, resist the us versus them mentality, and actively choose empathy over hate. By doing this, we not only protect ourselves from becoming a part of the problem, but we help others do the same. The truth is, these forces are still at work, shaping our actions and decisions right now. The only question is, will we recognize them in time and make a choice to resist? The choice is ours.